Zohan, who got elected the mayor of New York City, had 27,000 volunteers. The day after he got elected, what if each of those took a pile of authorization cards into their workplace and said, okay, now we're going to go ahead and organize? That would be cataclysmic, and it would be great.
Bill Berry is a retired organizer, longtime labor educator, and author of From First Contact to First Contract, a union organizer's handbook. Bill, welcome back to the program.
Hey, great. Thanks, guys, for having me. I really appreciate it.
Really looking forward to talk to you. You recently wrote an article for EWOC, the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee. For those of you that don't know, that is a joint venture, I suppose you could call it, of the UE, the United Electrical Workers Union, and the DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, aimed at increasing unionization, aimed at giving people who are interested in unionizing resources, volunteer organizer support, and things like that, and getting them connected to unions to kind of complete a campaign. And so you wrote an article for EWOC titled "The Decline of Union Membership and Lessons from the Past." We'll be talking about that, and that's kind of the context for this conversation. But I'm curious, just as an opening thought, what do you make of the state of the labor movement, particularly in the South, in the new year, in 2026?
Terrible. So one of the things that I would say, this book, the article you got, am I lining up square in your screen?
Yes, square enough, yeah.
Okay, all right, good. I've only had 3 or 4 shots of Jack Daniels, so I should be okay. One of the things that this article is from, it's a book called Don't Trump on Us, Making Our Unions Great Again. And I did it about 7 years ago, and unfortunately we've got to do it again. But I think the state of the labor movement is dismal, and the numbers show it. And I think we need to look honestly at what we have. And you just had a guy, a very good officer on from Texas, was talking about, they've had 25 elections and labor board elections in the state. In 1957, unions were about 37% of the workforce. And even better was this, what's called a spillover effect. About another 40% got what we had. And it was the time of a one-income family. And obviously it brought conflicts between bread makers and breadwinners and, kinds of roles. But it was a very, very different time than what we have now. And I often think about it when I go to demonstrations with Unite Here, for example, when they're picketing a hotel or a service industry. Their signs often say one job should be enough. And that is certainly true. And we're seeing it now at the beginning of the year, so many people losing their health insurance or subsidies and things like that. Private sector, we're down to 5%. The public sector, we're down to 10%. And we have lost. One of the dangers, and it was certainly related to the officer from Texas, is that the union officers over the last 40 years or so have become really more dependent on political activity than on pushing for new organizing and creating a movement. And by a movement, I mean there should be a radio show like this in every state, in every city. At one point in the few years ago, the president of the Amalgamated Transit Union bought an hour's worth of radio time in Baltimore every week because he wanted to have that kind of a broadcast out so the news would get out. But I think officers will go around and say the statistics are great because the surveys are that 60% of people would like to be represented by a union. And the question then is, okay, if 60% want to be represented by a union, how come only 10% are?
Right.
And so we need to look at ourselves and say, we're not where we want to be. And how did we get here? And I did a program earlier this year, a kind of a history thing called How We Got Where We Are. And it looks at unionism from the end of the Second World War on to today. And it's very clear, and I talk about this in the Don't Trump on Us book, that the ruling class has systematically planned well ahead of time a global attack on unions. And a very interesting article from the early 70s by Lewis Powell, who later became a Supreme Court justice, but laid out all of the programs to eliminate us. And I think it's great. And you can see it in the last election because the big issue is affordability. Affordability was not an issue in 1957. People had what they wanted. And union was a movement. People in town knew about it. And I think today, if you walk down your street and you take the first 100 people and say, okay, who's the president of your state AFL-CIO? If you find 2 people who know, I'd be very surprised. Mm-hmm. Because at least in Maryland, there is no activity. There's not a Labor Day parade. There's not a radio show. There are not just constant kinds of activities. And as of this morning, we are seeing a political crisis because the President of the United States has just invaded another country. And we've got to figure a way to stop that and to build. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And actually, an update since we came on the air is that Trump has said that the U.S. will, quote, run Venezuela for the foreseeable future. I mean, it's just incredibly concerning. And you're right that we really need a labor movement that will stand against things like that. But obviously, the kind of first order of business before it even means anything, because right now, the unfortunate thing is, as much as I would like, and I hope, the AFL-CIO's executive council is certainly better on foreign policy than it was 50 years ago. Any students of Cold War history would attest to that, I would imagine. And so maybe we will see the AFL-CIO put out a statement condemning the act, and I guess I would almost be surprised if we don't. But the real unfortunate reality is that if the AFL-CIO puts out the exact right statement about Venezuela tomorrow, saying that this is unconscionable and terrible and illegal and unconstitutional and it shouldn't happen and Congress should stand up, it just wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter even a little bit. And so really the first order of business is, like you said, getting us to a place where it would matter, right? I mean, you got to have enough power for it to matter if you say something before it really matters that much what you have to say. And so, you talked about how unions have declined. And so I'm curious, and you mentioned some of this in the article. How is it that you feel like that union membership and union density has declined so far in the United States? And what are some lessons that we can take from that decline to reverse it?
Well, I think the decline are multiple. One of them is that the bosses in general have made it a policy to eliminate us. And there have been no real responses. You look at the amount of money, for example, that unions will spend on political action versus the amount of money that they'll spend on new organizing. I also think that they will do, and the brother from Texas was talking about it, recruiting people to run for city council and kind of getting experience. But there's such a scarcity of organizers. And I was an organizer. I was a union member for 3 years, and then I was an organizer for 22, something like that. And then I taught it for another 15. The life learning curve is about 5 years for a good organizer. And you don't have them. And we need to develop those kinds of resources. We need to say to members and officers, our one focus is on expanding. And one of the things that is important is that money in the pocket of the members. Because if you look at the list of non-union companies, the biggest ones in the country, there are places like McDonald's, Home Depot, Target, Amazon. So anybody who's working, and I saw this many years ago in the retail supermarket industry, president of a local I knew up in northeastern Pennsylvania, his wife worked at a supermarket, an Acme. and this was 1981, and she came in, and they are now talking about tiers, wage tiers, so that the people who are in it have a certain set of benefits, but the new hires do not. And what they said was, our competition makes us do this. And as I said, in the whole shifting of retail industry from little mom and dad stores to Walmart and now to Amazon, we have not adjusted. And every union needs to participate in every campaign. That is one of the things that I think of for members, certainly, and officers. We live in a silo, and we worry about our industry and our local and our job and stuff like that. And anything else beyond that, we don't care. But we are all related, and we're certainly seeing it with the combination of ownership, with these big venture capital firms now buying up dozens of different, very unrelated. Warren Buffett is a perfect example. Berkshire Hathaway has dozens and dozens of companies that he runs through his money. And so we've got to look at, how do we get out and do this organizing? And how do we make every member understand that it's in their financial self-interest to do it? And so it may mean spending time, it may mean devoting resources, it may mean a lot of focusing on new organizing. And I've often found when you organize people that you put it in self-interest. Yeah, it's great. You and I can talk about building a movement and solidarity. But for the average member, you say, look, this is money in your pocket. Because the spillover effect has reversed. And what we used to do for the majority of non-union workers, the reverse is true. The non-union conditions are now being forced on us.
Right.
And I was struck about that. I was doing a program for a class in a guy's labor law class last spring, and talking about insurance, health insurance on a job. And these are all people who are working, going to school part-time. And I said that once upon a time, it was simply accepted that the employer would fully pay your health insurance. And they all looked at me like I was talking about some sort of a weird idea. And I said, because I can remember in the 80s when I was negotiating contracts, this was coming into existence. And the employers were saying, well, the non-union competition has it, we should do it. And it's basically, it's a cut in your pay. Because if you're paying money for health insurance out of every check, that's a pay cut. If you're paying co-pays when you go to the doctors, that's a pay cut. And so I think one of the things that we need to do is to convince every member, all 14 million members, that we got to organize. And we got to organize in every area, not just our industries or our particular specialty, but set it up at geographic so we share leadership, tips and training, but make it huge and make it the same kind of activities that you'll see in political activities. One of the things I've talked about in the book is the guy, Zohan, who got elected the mayor of New York City, had 27,000 volunteers. And the question is, the day after he got elected, what if each of those 27,000 people took a pile of authorization cards into their workplace and said, okay, now we're going to go ahead and organize? That would be transforming, be cataclysmic, and it would be great. And that's the kind of energy we need to do. We need to have this focus on organizing, and we need to keep doing it. We need to finance it. We need to focus on it. We need to create a union movement. And that's the radio shows, that is the parades, that is the social activities, that's in all kinds of stuff.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
You mentioned that the investment in organizing is really key, and there have been some attempts, or at least conversation, I don't know how concrete the attempts have been, but to get unions to dedicate a minimum of 10% of their operating budget on new organizing.
Or 30%.
or 30%. Yeah, I think it's something of a state of something of a commentary on the state of the movement, that the goal for many reformers and militants is 10% of the budget being on new organizing. When it is such an existential question, the question of new organizing. You also mentioned that in 2024, unions spent $280 million on politics. What if this had been designated for new organizing instead? And I do think that $280 million, I think that's probably inclusive of lobbying and PAC expenditures, which are different things. But nevertheless, I have always been, and actually some unions have, sponsored our program out of their PACs, for exactly that reason. They're like, well, it's either because it's coming out of a PAC, generally speaking, it's either, if we didn't give it to you, we would have given it to a politician. And so we think that it's more valuable to go to your program and keeping it running. And so we're really appreciative of that. But let's say that there are union officers out there who have control of the budget or have some level of control over their union's budget. And they say, okay, I do want to increase investment in new organizing. What are some of the programs that you think that new investment should fund?
Well, what I think it should do is training members to be organizers. And I think we're seeing this in EWOC, and I'm seeing in a lot of different unions, internal organizing programs. The first thing I think is there's a group, but I can't remember the guy's name, but who talks about how workers could self-organize. And you don't need a staff person, you can just go ahead and do it. And my answer to that is, it's like having a group of guys on a playground or in a gym, and you throw a basketball out and say, okay, create a team. And the answer is it doesn't happen. You have coaches, and that's why they do it, to kind of build this up. And this certainly is based on my background as an organizer. I think that the skilled organizer provides things to a campaign that the workers just don't know and don't understand. And obviously there's a lot of organizing they do, and a part of a staff job is to ship that organizing from me to the members. And it's a process, but you got to do it. As I said to you, the challenge is the learning curve for an organizer is maybe 5 years. And it's not something you can learn from a book. It's something you have to live with. And it's a lot of different, because you're making decisions. In many ways, you're the quarterback at the line looking at the defense and checking off and saying, oh, this is, we were going to run this play, but we're not going to run this now. Obviously, this is a lesson that the University of Alabama could learn, but I'm not going to get into the personal discussions.
Well, we're not big Alabama football fans, I'll say that.
That's
so you
okay.
didn't sting us too badly, but our brothers and sisters are real upset about it.
Okay, well, I'm just saying, one of the things that I have found is you try to illustrate what you're talking about in other terms that people will understand. One of the things I was a big advocate for home visiting when I was an organizer, and I still am. I think you get those relationships. But I said to the new organizers, and again, this is part of the training, that when you walk into a house to talk to somebody about the union, the first thing you do is have a conversation about something else. And you figure what that conversation is going to be by looking at the walls of the person's apartment or house. And you see what's up there. And if it's children, kids, you start talking about family and relationships and where your kids go to school and that kind of stuff. And it breaks that relationship. One of the things, and this is a guy thing, always was sports. And if you saw somebody had a jersey or a poster or something like that, you would trash the team or support it, or you get a discussion, and then you move into talking about their workplace and their union and what they want. But you develop that personal relationship, which I think is very, very important.
Right.
So I think first of all, the culture, where you say to every member, it's your self-interest for the union movement to grow. It's money in your pocket, and people will. They disagree about immigration. They certainly disagree about political stuff, where you had huge numbers of people, for example, who voted for an open anti-union candidate in Donald Trump. But you say to them, here, forget all that. It's money in your pocket. If we organize and we go back to where we were, 37%, 40%, something like that. Doesn't have to be necessarily in our own industry, but it changes. And so we need you to do it. And we need you to come up with organizing leads. We need you to be able to available for home visits. We need you to be available for other activities. We need to create a website, for example, where members say, this is why the union is important to me. And one of the things that I encourage unions to do, and many of them don't have any websites, but I got to kind of update again the new Don't Trump on Us book, are grievances that you win. And
yes,
it's a great thing to see a person saying you're holding a back paycheck for, $20,000 or something like that.
Yes, and Bill, let me rant on this for just a second, because, we've been on the air now for 5 years. We are a known entity, right? People know us in particularly Alabama, but across the South, I think, people in the labor movement had at least heard, oh, hey, there's a Southern Union Talk Radio program. We try so hard. And look, I understand that union officials and like business agents and stewards, they're super busy, and so they've got a lot on their plate. But we try really hard to push our contact forms out there to union leaders and union members across the state and across the South, telling them exactly that. Like, and trying to make it easy for them, and maybe this is something we can do in the new year. Maybe we can write out a form on our website that you fill out a couple of quick things and then it sends it to us, and you don't have to construct a whole email. But we've really tried to tell people, look, every time you win a grievance, like, people should know about that, and we'll include that on our newsletter. And if you want, you can come on our radio program and talk about it. Every time that every time that you win something in negotiations, there are there are literally millions of union members across the South that and every single day. I have no doubt that literally every single day, just across the South, somebody somewhere in the labor movement has beat the boss somehow.
That's right.
And
That's right.
they should, you're right that they should be doing their own kind of comms work and putting stuff out on their social media every time with a back paycheck or whatever. But they should at least just send us a little note about it, and we can let people know about it. If they don't want to do it, they just send us a note, and we'll do the formatting and everything. And it's so difficult getting them to do that. I don't know why.
It changes. Well, because they don't have a sense of a movement. And they need to look at, we are a movement. And it used to be that if you were in a town, union people would know each other. One of the things I always talk about is union visibility. And I have a sign, a yard sign in front of my house that says Proud Union Household. Mm-hmm. And I think everybody should have one. There should be 14 million of those signs in front of everybody's house, because there's 14 million members.
We were talking about what unions could do if they did decide to make the investment, and we were talking about just generally the importance of kind of conceiving of ourselves as a movement, and so I guess just some as a closing thought, I'm interested in your thoughts on what rank and filers can do themselves to try to change the trajectory of their unions. Because, if you're not an officer, you're not on the finance committee or a principal officer in a union, a lot of times you may not feel like you have very much control over how the union spends its money. And so, if you're just kind of a rank and file member and you don't have these offices or the power within the union, what are some steps that you think that these people can be taking to try to push the labor movement to do more organizing?
Well, what they have to do is you diagram the servicing model of union. Everything. The members have to say, okay, I'm going to take the time, the intelligence, and the energy to change that. So we run the union and not the officers. Services that all the officers are paid to members, and they're happy with the things as they are. And we just can't do that. So the members have to go to meetings.
We're still kind of breaking up. I think we got the gist of it, of the answer there. You know, the important thing is to really get involved and, you know, go to the meetings and start trying to kind of build a movement within your union to push your union to do more investing in union organizing. So, Bill, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much, and really appreciate it. Bill Berry is a retired organizer, longtime labor educator, and author of the book From First Contact to First Contract, a Union Organizer's Handbook. Bill, thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to talking to you again.
We'll try it again from a different computer in a few weeks.
All right, sounds good. All right.
Yeah, sounds good. Always appreciate Bill Berry. Yeah, Bill has been putting out good stuff for a long time. If you haven't already seen Zoom workshops he does through Labor's Bookstore, I do recommend that. You can go to Labor's Bookstore, check that out. There's a lot of good resources there, but also, he does Zoom trainings on a regular basis. So appreciate Bill. You know, he's one of the OGs, and hate the internet connection was spotty today. That's a bummer, but we'll just have to get him back on for sure, because I do want to have more of these conversations with folks. You know, we can look here and see what the problems are, at least on the surface, right? We have not enough members. There's not enough new elections. There's not enough new organizing happening to keep up with the growth of the population. So the real, meat of it is what do we do about that, and what does that look like? And, how do individuals, whether you're rank and file or not, how do you get involved and make some impact in that process? So, I look forward to having more of those conversations, especially here in January, as we kind of take a look back at the year that happened and look at the year ahead. It's going to be a lot of politics dominating the airwaves, I think, in 2026. But we can't lose sight of the organizing trends. And so we'll be interested to see what comes out from the BLS this year. The BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics, puts out the union membership data every year. Of course, like many agencies right now under the federal government, they have been subjected to all sorts of budget cuts and, staffing cuts and things like that. So who the hell knows when the report will come out, or if it'll be accurate, or, what we can make of it. But it'll be interesting to see, because every year the BLS puts out a list of how many union members there are, how it compared to the year before. They break it down by state, by industry. So that's always very interesting to see some of the trends and some of the, declines, the increases. There was a lot of overall last year, the density did dip slightly, not because of less union members, but because it's not keeping pace with the growing working age population. So across the South, most states did actually go down last year, density-wise, including here in Alabama. Some other states kind of held even. Some states actually increased a little bit, but not many. So it's going to be interesting to see what information comes out. But when you're talking about 7,000 new workers organized through NLRB elections, well, hell, there's 140,000 union members in Alabama alone, right? So 7,000's a pretty small amount. We're talking a fraction of a percent in terms of the overall union membership in the South, which is something like 3 million or so, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah. A lot of work to be done. A lot of work to be done. And, like I said, I don't want the politics to overshadow the need for new organizing because, as Bill said, expansion has to be on everyone's mind. Every union has to be thinking about how we grow the labor movement and how they can play a role in that. And, that's not always easy to get different labor unions to collaborate and to cooperate, especially if it's not something in their immediate territory or their immediate employer, right? To get them to send volunteers to help organize someone else's workplace. Sometimes a tall task, given how many unions are already kind of strapped, resource-wise or capacity-wise at least. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to take a look at these numbers some more throughout the year or throughout the month. I want to do the comparison, look at how we ranked in previous years. But yeah, biggest takeaway I would say right now is that Missouri seems to be doing something right. And so I'm very interested to hear from folks from the Missouri labor movement this year. It would be interesting to know part of why things are going right. Why do they have higher density? Why are they doing fairly well in new organizing compared to the rest of the South? And we've seen some political ramifications, I think, in that. If you look at some of the ballot measures that they've had in Missouri that have been pro-worker, that have been able to secure, majority votes. So those are some things that I'm thinking on. The Teamsters obviously have been very present in new organizing based on my look at the Southern data. So, whatever folks think about the current administration with the Teamsters, we've had a lot of conversations on this show about Sean O'Brien and some of the internal politics of the Teamsters leadership. But, it does appear that at least there's still new organizing happening with the Teamsters across the South. UNFI has been a big campaign, but there's been others as well. So what Bill put in his article that I think really stood out to me is when he listed the top 10 employers and how many of those have no union organizing happening, right? Like, not only are there not unions in some of these companies, there's not even real campaigns underway. So that's a big problem when some of the biggest employers in town don't have a union presence at all, and no one's really even working on changing that, at least from the outside, looking in at least. So that's a big problem. I enjoyed Bill's article. Appreciate the brother from Texas coming on this morning as well, and definitely want to, see what they're doing with candidate training and learn more about their political program. I do agree with Bill that often we put too much emphasis in unions on the political program and the political spending and not enough on the new organizing and the leadership development. But, we've got to operate everywhere. And I think in a lot of areas, your labor council or state federation may not even really be doing enough in the political realm, right? Even if that is a focus, it still may not be very effective. So even if that's the main thing it does, is it working, right? Or does the endorsement process you have right now, is that working? Is it engaging your members? Are you making an impact in the election? Are you endorsing candidates who really deserve it? Those are all good questions to be asking this year.
Absolutely. Somebody in the chat said, it's the man keeping us down with the audio. Yes, indeed. Free American says, I've often wondered why we don't have Union Banks, stores, gas stations. And, the thing about that is just that it's difficult to pull together the capital to own the businesses. But there is a bank of labor that's owned by the Boilermakers Union. That is where I bank, and that is where we bank with the show, and that is where we bank with our labor council. So if you would like to, if you're a union member and you would like to, bank through a union-owned bank, you can do that with the Bank of Labor. But the reason that that's not common is because it's a difficult thing to do, and also we got away from it. It used to be something that the Knights of Labor were really interested in the late 19th, early 20th century. Knights of Labor were all about some cooperatives, and they literally had the idea of what if we had a union town, right, and everything in town
was owned or operated or controlled by the union in some way or another. And so I think it's a concept that we had at one point. We went away from it. Traditional collective bargaining at big employers kind of took the precedence. But I do think there's something to that. I do think that there's something to the circular economy and keeping our money amongst ourselves and shopping, with our people and keeping it in the family, so to speak. And so I think there is opportunity for unions to do more of that. There are pension funds that could, certainly do that, right? Like I think about the state of Alabama. The retirement systems of Alabama actually own some of the nicest golf trails and hotels in the state. It's not exactly a union per se, but similar. And it's always nice to know, like if I go on a trip somewhere, that I'm staying at an RSA hotel, right? My money is going to support the retired educators and state employees, and not just some venture capitalist hedge fund somewhere. And Steve in the chat pointed out that some Wells Fargo banks have started to organize. That's correct. We've covered that campaign on the show. We've definitely talked a little bit about the Wells Fargo campaign because it is unique. There are very, very few unions in the banking industry. So it's been exciting to see that. That is a CWA campaign, Communications Workers of America. So shout out CWA for the work there. Definitely encourage folks to pay attention to the Wells Fargo campaign. If you know someone who works at a bank, tell them about the Wells Fargo campaign. They absolutely can have a union. I think that's one of those jobs where a lot of people assume it's not for them, or, they just don't. People assume that unions are for construction industry or for manufacturing, or maybe even, for teachers or public employees. But if you work at a bank, if you work anywhere, if you get a paycheck, if you have a boss, you need a union, right? And that's the bottom line. And we've got to do a better job getting more people to realize that, and doing a better job getting more people to take action.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.